Huge thank you to CIBC for making We Get It possible.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, folks. For those of you watching, today is Monday, February 21st. It might be family day for some. It might be Louis Riel day for others. Some of us have the day off. Some of us do not. Unfortunately, if you do not, I'm hoping at least this is making your day at 7 p.m. Eastern, watching the 4th episode of season 3 of We Get It with your host, Alex Mandarino. Very, very excited to be here today talking to my new friend, Nick Evans. And new for me, new for YACC. I know he's been with the YACC community only for a few months now. And Nick, it's really, really glad to have you on. You're a new member of the new Insight team, hailing from Winnipeg, Manitoba. We were chatting before we even started the recording. You're a very big advocate of Winnipeg, have a lot of incredible historic knowledge, which is something I feel like a lot of people can't say. So I'm certainly excited to kind of kick things off and get right into this conversation. But welcome, Nick, and really glad to have you. I think we're going to have some fun and really dive into some issues and some conversation that not a lot of people in the community have a lot of experience in. But I'll kind of pause there and just say, Nick, what are 3 words you'd use to describe yourself?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And the first word I would use is artistic. I've always been a pretty creative person, and that's become a big part of my life after the experience of cancer, for sure. The second thing is persistent. I don't really give up very easily, and I don't mind banging my head against the wall until I figure something out. And then the last thing is patience. I think that's something that I developed later in life, but it's now become a strong quality of mine.
Totally. Persistence is a good one. I don't think I've ever had someone describe themselves as that, but I think it's a good quality to have. So I'm glad you threw that one in there. That's awesome.
That one has gotten me a lot of good, brought me a lot of good things in my life, you know, because I think people often kind of give up right before they get something, and that doesn't usually happen with me. And my parents taught me well. They never let me quit anything, and they told me to never give up on stuff. And so, yeah.
Good. It's a great mentality to have. I love that. And so, Nick, for those who don't know you, which I feel like is a lot of people who may be watching this because you're very new to the community, can you tell us a little bit about your cancer story with testicular cancer, your original orchiectomy, and then your subsequent diagnosis? If you could just get into all of that.
Yeah, I'll start right from the beginning. I was 21 years old. I would probably say, you know, I might have developed a lump on one of my testicles even when I was 20. It took me a very long time to get it checked out. It started off very small, and it was very gradual growth, but essentially it got to a point where I knew something was really wrong. I went to my family physician, and I'll never forget this part, is my dad had been waiting like months and months to get a urologist appointment. And my family physician checked me over for a few seconds, you know, went to the computer, did the paper stuff, and told me I had a urologist appointment booked in a week. And I told my dad that, you know, I think he knew before me that something was seriously wrong. Went to the urologist a week after my initial appointment with my family physician, and it was the same thing. He looked at me for about 2 seconds and said, "Hey, you have a cancerous tumor on your testicle. I'm going to book you a surgery. We're going to have that removed." And about, I think it was 4 or 5 days later, I was lying on the surgery bed and getting my testicle removed. And I consider myself very lucky because I did not need further treatment after that. They had no sign of any other cancer in my body, but it made it very difficult to process everything that went down. I think I was in shock for a long period of time. I would even say, like, you know, close to 2-3 years, I was still in shock. It really didn't settle for a long time. When I had initially reached out to Cancer Care Manitoba, they linked me up with a therapist who is very clinical. And I always think this is like, you know, there's times when you want a clinical doctor, like, you know, you don't want your surgeon coming in with a Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops when he's about to operate you. Maybe some people do, but that would be a little off-putting to me. Except for the therapy part, the aftermath, it was kind of like, you know, he had kind of like the white lab coat, And you know, it was very it wasn't very personal, the session. And I think I had 1 or 2 sessions with him, and I felt like things were almost worse. And I really left a bad taste in my mouth, trying to reach out for help through cancer care. And that ended up being a big problem for me, because I just kind of figured I'd have to do all the processing and recovery on my own. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it led to many problems in my life personally. We'll probably get into those in a bit, but 10 years later, it came back. And so it was pretty much the same thing. Well, actually, no, it's a little bit different, this diagnosis, because I had felt pain in my last testicle, but only having one testicle, I didn't really have a reference point to it.
Right.
My family physician who diagnosed the first time, he actually resigned, and I kind of got moved to a registered nurse instead of a family physician. And I would highly recommend anybody who has cancer in their history to, if they ever get referred to a registered nurse, get a family physician. Like, I'm not trying to put down registered nurses, but like, I had gone to her complaining about pain in my testicle, and she gave me a physical exam and sent me home. And then 3 months later, I felt a growth on my testicle. I went in, she gave me a physical exam, and she was about to send me home again, saying that I was all good. And I said, no, I need some sort of test. I need an ultrasound, something. So she's like, oh, okay, well, just in case, I'll give you this ultrasound. I go to do the ultrasound, and right away, the guy looks at me. He's like, oh, yeah. He's like, you got a 4 millimeter sized tumor on your testicle, and that's most likely cancerous. He's like, you knew about this, right? And I'm like, no. So that was a huge shock. And to make things even worse, my urologist, who's a great guy, he said, there's a chance we might be able to cut the tumor off and save your testicle because it's a certain size. Mm-hmm. If I would have gone in sooner, there was a much better chance. When they did the surgery, they weren't able to save my testicle. They had to cut it all out. So I'm not, I'm not going to live my life thinking about what could have happened. But there's a chance that if I would have caught it sooner, I would still have one functioning testicle right now. Right, but it most likely would have came back again, and it is what it is, right? But yeah, that's the second time was exactly the same in the fact that after I had done the ultrasound, they had booked a surgery within a week, and so it was all just a blur. This time was different because now not having any of my own testicles, I've lost the ability to produce testosterone. So I was given a prescription of testosterone Sipinit that I have to inject bi-weekly via syringe in the old buttocks. Mm. Yeah, that was a big adjustment. Learning how to administer that myself was a bit of a trial and error. There was a couple times. One time I was doing it, and I guess I pushed the needle in just a little too far, so I felt a little bit of a zing go down my leg, and that didn't go away for a couple months. So, yeah, it's like I still feel lucky because I didn't need radiation or chemo, and being a part of group meetings, I've heard just how terrible that experience is. So I consider myself lucky, but I have to take testosterone for the rest of my life. Little strange things like my pharmacy and my doctor, they kind of cross their signals every now and then, and so I'll go to get my prescription refilled, and they won't have it ready because someone didn't sign off on it. And so just little things like that. It's been difficult, but I still I have most of my health, and now that I've connected with group meetings and YACC, it's totally changed my perspective on life and living with the experience of having cancer and still being, I'm only 30. Actually, I turned 34 on the 16th this month, so somewhat young.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, in the community especially. Yeah.
But yeah, that's been my experience, and I really believe that you know, the major thing that has helped me heal and brought a lot of joy into my life and hope in my life has been group meetings, specifically YACC, because YACC is, you know, the biggest community that I've been introduced to since getting involved. And, yeah, so
100%. No, and it's very unique in that, like you mentioned that, you know, you, in this particular case, I mean, you didn't really have to go through chemo or radiation or anything like that. It was somewhat of a quick procedure, but obviously the timing of everything, and a lot of people can probably relate, timing means everything when it comes to something like this. So that definitely is something that needs to be taken into consideration. And you made it known really early. But even on that concept of timing, I mean, when that first diagnosis of testicular cancer was given at 21 years old, it's such an extremely early time in your life to be approached by cancer of any type. So what was your life like prior to your diagnosis at 21 years old? And I mean, what was like your initial reaction to when it was broken that testicular cancer was the diagnosis?
well, I mean, I was raised by two loving parents that are still together. And so that's been, you know, a big gift in my life. They supported me in everything I did. I did play a little guitar when I was younger, but I ended up getting really good at sports. And I was an extremely insecure kid, needed a lot of attention, needed people to like me, was always trying to make everyone laugh in school, getting in trouble for that. And when I started playing sports, it got me more popular than playing guitar. So I kind of left art and the guitar on the side and just kind of focused on sports, which was good. You know, I love sports and I think they're very important. But when I look at schools and I see the imbalance of funds, you know, how little funds go towards art and how much funds go towards sports, it really breaks my heart, because like something about art, it's so inclusive, it's so expressive, it really creates a different atmosphere than competitive sports, and it can really change a person's view of themselves. So I was naturally good at sports and my head just inflated, you know, and I thought I was confident, but I was really just an arrogant kid. And so being arrogant, thinking you're invincible, yeah, it was quite the shock to get cancer. And yeah, it was because it happened so fast and it was hard to process. It really turned my entire life upside down. I think all that arrogance that I was inflated with really deflated, and I was left with looking at who I really was, and that was too much for me at that age. And so it led me down, you know, some dark paths. You know, I post cancer, like I did the first time at 21, I was really confused, and I didn't really have like a direction. Like I was good at school, but I didn't really want to go to university right after high school. And then my friends were going to university, so then I kind of joined late, and I was just in this kind of mess and still processing the experience of cancer. And that led me just to start drinking quite a bit. And it got to the point where I was drinking every weekend heavily. I gave up on university and just started working trades, which I did like for a long time. But in Winnipeg here, it gets pretty freezing cold in the winter. So unless you have like an indoor trade, or unless you're made of absolute iron, like, and you got a pretty solid boss that gets winter jobs, often you get laid off in the winter when you're working trades. That's pretty common here. Yeah. And I think that whole like the down period of going on EI or doing odd jobs to fill the void, that was really hard on me. And so yeah, I would start drinking heavily, and I ended up drinking myself into early stage cirrhosis at 29. And you know, luckily for me, I you know, had some brain cells left, and I realized like, hey, this is it. Like either I stop drinking or I'm just gonna die. And so that was 5 years ago on the 18th, actually, February 18th, 5 years ago.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I haven't had a drop, and I don't really get urges anymore at all. And I think that was a big turning point in my life, because it was very similar to the cancer experience, where I had this the liquid courage, this kind of fake confidence from the alcohol. And then once I gave that up, I had completely deflated again, and I was left with who I really was. And when I looked in the mirror, I was terrified. And I ended up getting into hiking really seriously, it's very funny, because now when I hear about all other people's stories and you look at the science, like connecting with nature is a huge key to recovery for a lot of people. And we have this hiking trail that runs along the Manitoba and Ontario border. It's called the Mantario hiking trail. It's about 66 kilometers long. So it takes a couple of days to do, unless you're like a marathon runner or something. And at first it's funny, because at first I was all about conquering it, trying to do it, like get this done. And I did it a couple times, and probably around the third or fourth time I did it, I realized, like, no, like the whole point is the enduring, is being in the nature. And so now when I do it, I really take my time. I'm constantly just taking breaks, sitting on a rock, just looking at the beautiful Canadian Shield boreal forest.
Sure.
Yeah, it's that pink granite. It's just incredible landscape out east from us here in Manitoba. And so that was a saving grace for me, and pretty much, that terrified feeling that I got from looking in the mirror, that totally changed, and all the questions I had about myself were answered out on that trail. And that's been a big part of my life since quitting drinking, and it's kind of got me to the place I am now.
Wow, that's a great. I mean, I appreciate you opening up and sharing all of that info, Nick. And congratulations, the fact it's been 5 years to what we're filming this on the 20th, 2 days ago. Amazing milestone. It's perfect timing that we're kind of doing this conversation. Then, again, congratulations on that. Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, and everyone kind of has their own ways of dealing with all of the mental aspect of being diagnosed with cancer. And one thing, especially at 21 or even in your 20s, whether you're male or female or identify as whatever you identify as, the concept of infertility is not something that really comes up very often. So did that come up when you were first diagnosed at 21? And what options, if any, were offered to you initially?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting, because pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
I think like it was brought up briefly in like a kind of cautionary way, like there's a chance your sperm count might be low because you only have one testicle now. But there was no immediate, like, let's get you tested, let's see what your sperm count is, there was nothing like that. And I think because I still had one healthy testicle, that's probably something that they just didn't think was a priority at that time.
For sure.
I was in a relationship when it happened, and we weren't ready to have kids or anything, so it didn't seem that immediate to focus on at that point. But yeah, looking back at it, I was like, I probably should have. And like it's funny, and they always talked about, they did talk about the chance of it coming back, but they promised me it was a very low chance.
yeah Oh man.
And but it was very interesting in that sense. And I think just having the one testicle still was kind of what kind of made them gloss over that, and thinking like, oh well, he's still got one good one, so we'll cross the bridge when we get to it. But yeah, it would have been, I think, it probably, thinking back, it probably would have given me a little bit of confidence or something, just to know, right? Because you're so in the dark, right? And
yeah, no, I know. And that's, I mean, at that age, I was diagnosed when I was 20, so a year prior to you in terms of age, but it's not on your mind. It's not something that you're like, oh, I'm not ready. It's not something I'm worried about. You kind of put the like the rose-colored glasses on and everything's fine. But it's definitely something that should be mentioned early. I was lucky to have frozen some samples early on, but I know not a lot of people have that same ability. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, and we're going to talk on how you kind of dealt with that and a few questions coming up as well. But I'm kind of curious. I mean, when you were diagnosed the second time, a little while later, did you feel at all better equipped to manage it because you'd gone through the experience the first time, or was it just as difficult for you?
It was worse, actually.
Really?
It was much worse. I think after my first diagnosis, I did have a bit of a rain cloud over my head, thinking like, wow, I got cancer when I'm 21. Like this could easily happen again. My oncologist was great. He was very confident with all the, I think it's about 5 years after diagnosis, I kept getting CT scans. They gradually go down. So you get one every 6 months when you first get it, and then it goes down to once a year. And then after 5 or 6 years, they say, good luck, which I understand because I believe CT scan can give you cancer as well if you get too many of them, right? Like it's a balancing act, like most cancer treatments. But yeah, and so I had gone like, the last CT scan was like 4 years ago, and then to have the pain in the testicle again, and this kind of the way it creeped up, and then kind of getting misdiagnosed by the registered nurse, and then having the shock of it hitting me again, and then also realizing, oh dang, like I don't have a third testicle that I can rely on now, like they're gone for good. Just that idea of being medically castrated, and like what's going to happen to me without having any testicles. I've always been like somewhat of like a manly kind, like I'm pretty far over on the male spectrum of the male side of the gender spectrum. So it's like it wasn't an issue of whether I'm still going to be a man or not. But that definitely creeps in, and
Totally.
it's really that was terrifying. And then also, I mean, the surgery was like I knew what to happen with surgery.
Right.
So I chose not to get put under. Both times I got a spinal, and it's when they put a huge needle in your back and you get paralyzed for 8 hours from the waist down. So that was like, oh, okay, I can do that. The surgeon on the second time didn't quite have the same magical hands as my first surgeon, because it was a little bit longer recovery. I remember it was like a little rougher than the first time, but still did a great job. And I recovered right away. Like I was working as a foster parent when I got the second time. And I actually like went home and just went back to work on the same day of my surgery, like walking around. But what made it really difficult was that rain cloud that was over my head after the first time. It grew massive. I was like crippled by the thought of it coming back, because they said, if your cancer does come back, it's going to come back in an area like my prostate or something which you can't just cut out necessarily, right?
Yeah.
That was pretty scary, and made it very difficult to process this, with having to take testosterone, being reminded every 2 times a week, like, hey, you don't have testicles, you got to inject yourself with testosterone. Just, all these big changes. Having the hormone imbalance was nothing like I've ever experienced. Like,
I can't imagine.
It is one of the most difficult things to describe to people. I find I have conversations with women that have gone through menopause, and I find that is where I get the best clarity on hormonal pain, because it's just like there's no physical pain, but it's just your emotions they play tricks on you, and like you don't really, you get to a point, like now I'm doing a little better, but the first year or so I didn't know what to trust on my own emotions. And I think a lot of us we really rely on, you know, what they call the gut feeling, or, you know, we really rely on what our instincts tell us. And to not be able to rely on my instincts, because, you know, I would want to like strangle like my foster kids at sometimes. I get these feelings where it's like I was so mad over nothing. And it's like this isn't me. This isn't right. I know this isn't right. Why do I feel this so strongly? You know, just figuring out how to weather those storms was extremely difficult. I ended up going off my testosterone for about 8 months.
Okay.
It was kind of funny because I did it kind of over the winter, so like fall to spring. And I didn't do any kind of active, nothing athletic, nothing active. I was drowsy, tired all the time. My muscles completely atrophied. So I got to the point where I couldn't even flex my bicep anymore. And it was just scary. And I can't really tell you the reason why I did that. I think I was just sick of sticking a needle in my butt.
For sure.
I just wanted to see like what could I don't like the idea of having to rely on medication, especially, you know, when my pharmacy giving me a hard time and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, get out of here, you know, I don't need you, but yes, I do need you. And so, yeah, and so that's been really tough. But I got to a point where I leveled off. I started taking my testosterone consistently, and that was when I reached out back to cancer care, because I knew like there's nothing here to help me. You know, my parents, as amazing as they are, you know, they just can't help you with the, unless you had the experience of cancer. They just can't be that support for you. You need someone who's gone through the experience. It's just like they can do the best that they can, and they did great. Like I would be nowhere without them. But when it comes to the support of healing, you know, in recovery of the wake of cancer, you need someone who's been there, who knows it. And so I figured, you know, it's the movie Fight Club, which I hold near and dear to my heart, because the guy the Edward Norton's character, he can't sleep for a year or something, and he's talking to this doctor about how he's in so much pain. And the doctor's like, well, you want to see someone who's in real pain, go here. And he sends him to a testicular cancer support group. And so I felt very validated. I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I have gone through some serious pain here. And so that movie, it kind of lifted my spirits. And I think it probably got me connected. Like it got me the motivation to reach out. And so I reached out to cancer care, and they hooked me up with this awesome counselor, like just amazing guy. And my first session with him, I voiced how I'd like to join a group meeting, and he just looked at me and was like, well, there's one tonight if you want to go tonight. And so I was like, sign me up, I'm ready. I'm so ready. And that was about 2 years after my second diagnosis. So 12 years after my first diagnosis, I finally connected to a meeting. And from the first meeting on, I was like, I just felt a sigh of relief. I felt, you know, a warm current flow through my body. I felt heard, I felt accepted. And I realized that the rain cloud that had just billowed above me, felt it start to shrink. Because when I heard people's stories about going through chemo, going through radiation, having ostomy bags, you know, stuff like this, it made me realize that, you know what, if it does come back, you can deal with it. You know, if it comes back, you just go through the steps, and you do what you can, and you move on. And, you know, and I never would have changed that shift inside me never would have happened unless I had heard from somebody who had gone through a situation which I consider, you know, worse than mine. And it was just, you felt heard, felt like I finally found the place where I belong. And then shortly after my first group meetings, I was introduced to YACC, and that was just like, you know, my mind was blown. I was like, oh my goodness, like there's a whole community across Canada here.
Oh yeah.
Everybody with a remarkable story. You know, like and I've always loved stories. I've always writing has been one of my favorite artistic mediums, and to hear these people's stories, the way they tell it, like it's just I've never heard people tell these stories of these intense stories in such a light air. Because there's quite a few people at YACC that you can tell they've told their story many times. They've gotten really, but they say it with such brevity, you know, that it's like it's so calming. It's the best form of healing. It was the best form of healing for me, and it was the first time I really felt hopeful for my future since the second. Yeah.
I'm glad. There's a lot to unpack there, but I mean, just the idea of the support and the fact that you made it to YACC through all that different medium, and you know, you finally found that outlet that you were so deserving of, but also you're seeking out for the entire time is amazing to hear. And we're glad that you're within the community, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to learn a lot from you out of this. And I'm going to go back to kind of how YACC, you know, how you felt within YACC, and then obviously when you really found that first peer support program, but kind of transferring a little for a bit to really a bright spot of the cancer journey, and what kind of led you to this spot here is opening up the experience of you being a foster parent. So first of all, we were talking before we recorded, you have 4 foster kids. Tell us about them. What are they like? What are their names? Get into it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you know what? I'll just give you a little bit of background first. So started off, there's 2 types of foster homes, specialized and general. Specialized homes deal with higher risk kids. So kids who have gone through a little bit more trauma, have been probably moved around from placement to placement. You know, they require more support, and they often are violent and dangerous. So I did that. I had 3 level 4s in my house for about 3 years. And you know, I just kind of got sick of worrying about getting stabbed in my sleep, which, you know, it's part of it's the nature of the beast. So I recently switched over to being a general foster home. And so this has been great because now I have 6-year-old twins that are adorable. They're hugs and kisses. They reciprocate the love. They're excited to do whatever stupid thing I would try to get them to do. We're always watching the Disney movies and singing along to the Disney songs. And I also have their 11-year-old brother, who you know, he's very sweet too, and he definitely is a great role model for his brothers. And so that's been a really cool dynamic. I've never had siblings that are that different in age, and it's been awesome because, you know, I can kind of, when he's playing with them, I can kind of step back a bit and just let them go. And it's really cute because the 11-year-old was removed from his home about 2 years ago, I think. So he hadn't been living with his siblings for a long time. So this is the first time living with his siblings in a couple of years. And so that's been great to kind of keep them all together and kind of, you know, get that brother bond back, you know, because it's so important.
I can't imagine 100%.
You know, right? Can you imagine? Like, I don't know if you have a sibling, Alex, but like, you know, it's just like growing up without your sibling, I just feel like a piece of your family is missing, right? And
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's nice that you just have the ability to bring them together in that like form. So that's awesome. I had no idea. That's really great to hear.
It's hard enough not living with your birth parents, so it's to get the brothers together, and the birth family has been really excited about that, so that's been great. And then I also have a 13-year-old who he's kind of like he's very sweet, very polite, well-mannered, smart kid, and he's kind of like on the cusp of becoming moving to a specialized home. So the agency kind of told me like this is, you know, his last kind of chance here, but it's not for him. It's more he just trying to keep him in school and doing the right things, because it's such a fragile moment in his life. If he doesn't continue to go to school, you know, he'll get moved to a specialized home, and then there's a really poor chance of him graduating. Like, I think, you know, I don't want to give out any kind of numbers, but
of course,
it's extremely low percentage of children that graduate into specialized homes, as opposed to general home, which it's much higher. So that's just like, it's a fine line, and it's tough because, you know, lots of these kids, they're very capable, you know, and it's just a matter of finding the right match and keeping them in a productive environment. So I'm very positive about him, because, you know, he's been saying and doing all the right things. And so we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, it's a crazy dynamic. You know, I also have 2 big dogs, so 4 kids and 2 dogs is a lot for one person. But I get help. My mom will come by every once in a while, and I also get some respite and support hours for workers to come in and give me a break. So it all works out. But yeah, it's kind of you know, we have dinner at the table every night, and we all joke around, and it's definitely a family. You know, like it doesn't. Yeah. The fact that we're not all related doesn't matter at all.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't make a difference, and that's amazing. And you're doing obviously some incredible work, and I'm sure you know, both of the needs that you both have, whether the children or whether yourself, are met in the fact that there's a family dynamic there. So I love that. I'm glad that you shared all of that. That's such a crazy, like, you must be a busy guy, even though like to this weekend you have some time to yourself. So I'm not going to take up a crazy amount of time so that you can enjoy it, but that's awesome that
I'm just gonna
I
go
can't
back.
imagine with it.
I'm just gonna to sleep after this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get some time to relax. That's amazing. But yeah, incredible. No, I mean, what point, like, was it after the first diagnosis, the second one? At what point did you actually consider, like, this is the decision I want to do? I want to consider fostering. Like, what was there like one catalyst? How did that all come about?
Yeah, there was actually, because I had a roommate when I was working trade still, who was working as a respite worker. So the respite support workers, these are people that the foster parent gets money to come into the home, and support is specifically for the child. So they come in and they just be a mentor, be a friend, have a good time with the kid. And respite is for the foster parent. So you come in and the foster parent can go have somewhat of a life.
Yeah. Okay.
So my roommate was working as that, and it was one of those, you know, just those predetermined moments in my life where I got laid off from my trades job. Was just, you know, sick of the trades life. I was getting pretty you know, I had little patience for it anymore, the way that people talk, blah blah blah. And so I ended up just saying, hey, like, can you get me a shift at the house? And that was it. He got me a shift at the house that he worked at, and it was like a 12-hour kind of deal. I went in, and it didn't feel like work at all. I've always been good with children. My mom's side of the family, they pop out a baby almost every year for the last like 15 years, it seems. So the family gatherings are just full of kids, and you know, I can tell the other adults are very jealous about the amount of time that the kids want to spend with me, because I see you just treat kids like an adult, or you tease them and all that stuff, and they love it. You know, if you don't baby and coddle them. That's there's different times for that, but when you're at the family gatherings, I'm always poking fun at them, and like, you know, I'm also like a bigger guy, so I can all lift them up and, you know, do that kind of stuff. So it's always come very natural to me. And then when I worked the shift at the home, it was the same thing. It didn't feel like work at all. And after that first shift, I just started taking as much work as I could, because it is also like decent pay. And, you know, you're usually working with someone else, and people are respectful, and sure, the kids can be hard sometimes, but they're children. You know, like, it's much different being talked to poorly by a child than it is a grown person that you're supposed to be building a house with, right? And it's just like, for me, it was just, there was no comparison to how I felt after a shift. And eventually, pretty quickly, I started pestering one of the agencies, because I had my own house. So I was like, hey, like, you know, like, what does it take to become your own foster parent? I don't want to be a respite worker anymore. I want to be calling the shots, you know, because of course I thought I could do a better job than the foster parent that I was working for. I think that's a pretty natural feeling, until you actually get certified, then you realize, oh my goodness,
so much to it.
Yeah, yeah, it's not as easy as it looks. But yeah, I think I only worked as a respite worker for about 9 or 10 months, and then finally they were just like, okay, let's get this guy his own house because we're sick of hearing him call in or whatever. Which is pretty short. I think usually people do about 2 years or so, but they needed well, actually, sorry, I'll tell the real story. This is pretty funny. So
Yeah.
I had switched. I was working for my roommate's house for a bit, and then I had switched to a different home, and I was now working for a guy that my roommate was not connected to, and I was calling it was a different agency as well. So I was calling the new home that I was working at. I was calling their agency, trying to get certified. The foster parent that I was working for, he was doing some things that weren't he wasn't supposed to. He was leaving the country without telling the agency, and so they found out, and they were like, hey, we're gonna close his home and move his children into yours if you want to get certified. So that was a bit awkward, especially because him and I were like kind of friends. It's not the way that I wanted things to go down, but I knew that fostering was what I wanted to do. So I jumped at it. I was like, you know what, let's just do it. And him and I we're on good terms now. It's all the dust has settled. But yeah, it was all pretty fast. And luckily, I had been respite working for the kids for about, whatever it was, 6 months, 8 months, for a while there. And so I knew the kids firsthand. It wasn't like they were bringing brand new kids into my home. And so that worked out really nice to do it that way. But yeah, ever since then, it's just been, I really, it hasn't felt like work, and it just feels like, this is what I was meant to do. I think eventually I might try and go back to school to get a social work degree, just because that really helps. It really helps understand the system, and I don't like fostering is. I think I could possibly do it, for the rest of my life, but I think there's a bit of a window, as I'm going to get older, I am going to have to look for something else to do eventually, right? Because even birth parents, they don't have to take care of young kids till they're 60, right?
Yeah, of course.
70, right? Like it's a lot of physical it takes a lot of physical energy to take care of the kids, and eventually I'm not going to have that. So I think a little bit in the future, but as for the time being, like I just love it, and it doesn't feel like work at all, and it's very rewarding, like you're changing a child's life and helping them find some direction during a very traumatic experience of being disconnected from your birth parents. It's quite a tragedy, and I think that part of where I get a lot of my passion is, I, like you said, I read a lot of history, and I think it's very clear to me that CFS is just an extension of residential schools. It's not as bad. There's some agencies that are better than others, but it's still taking children away from their parents, and a lot of the parents that get their children apprehended are suffering from generational trauma, and so that's been something that I've been very passionate about. As you can see, I'm dressed in the all.
Of course.
Yeah, Phyllis Webstad, I believe, is the child that went to school with her brand new orange shirt. That's where the Orange Shirt Day started. And she went to a residential school, and they took the shirt away from her, and she never saw it again, kind of thing. So I've been a big advocate for the truth to come out. There's been a big movement with the graves being uncovered, but we're still at the truth phase. We're not moved into the reconciliation yet, because there's a lot of people that aren't fully convinced or don't believe it, whatever it is, and I understand it's a hard concept to get behind, but it really is a tragedy. And I can only speak for Manitoba because that's what I know, but a major percentage of children in care are Indigenous, and there's two ways of looking at that. You know, you could look at it and be like, oh, well, Indigenous people are bad parents. And to me, I think that that viewpoint is still alive and well, and I don't know why, because it's completely garbage. You know, it's not a matter of good parents, bad parents. This is in the wake of a tragedy of having these birth ties severed, and like I think it was 7 generations of residential schools, and so that the fact that, you know, it's a majority of Indigenous kids in care is not reflective of parenting. That's a reflection of systematic racism, you know. So it's I won't get too far into this one because I'm very passionate about it. I could waste a bunch of your time talking about this.
No, but look, the passion shows, and obviously there's a reason for why you got into fostering and something that you love to do. You said that. I've heard you say it already 2 or 3 times, and that's what people should be doing. If you can follow, I wouldn't maybe call it a dream, but you know, your passion, and obviously it's a two-way street where you're helping them and they're kind of helping you, in a sense. It's incredible to hear, and I'm sure a lot of people have a very, like, especially if they're listening to this, might have that drive now to go and look more into the concept of fostering, and if, you know, or at least it's something that they haven't heard. So if someone is interested in kind of following that path, or maybe get in a similar position, who was thinking of becoming a foster parent, any advice you'd give them, any tips, anything like that?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is be prepared to, you know, give your whole life to it. You know, I think why fostering came so easy to me is because I just, you know, I don't have like I traveled a ton in my younger days, so I'm not really interested in like I do like traveling, but I'm just not interested in traveling very much. And if you're a person who likes to go places all the time, it's tough because you really can only go, I think, like, I don't know what the exact rules are, but you can only leave for about 2 weeks at a time. It's expensive because you have to pay someone to watch the kids while you're gone if you're not taking them with you. And so it becomes difficult if you like to travel around and be free. For me, you know, I'm traveled out, so I don't mind staying stationary for a while here. You know, all my hobbies I can do from my home. I don't, you know, I'm not a person who has to see my friends every weekend. I keep in contact with them, but it's a large portion of my life is just being here with the children. So being infertile, you know, it's kind of been a blessing in disguise because like I was still fertile when I started, and then having cancer the second time, becoming infertile. Now I realized, you know, how precious being a father is, you know, and how that's such a privilege. And when I had a specialized home dealing with the teenagers, the high risk kids, you know, it's still, you get a little bit of that fathering role, the father void kind of filled. But ever since I switched to a general home and it's the younger children, that has been something that's been so fulfilling. Like I used to be obsessed with, I do have some of my sperm frozen. Yeah, so I used to be obsessed with this idea, you know, like I have 6 or something saved, and I used to be just obsessed, like one of them's got to work, you know, one of them's got to work.
Yeah.
And ever since I've got been fostering the younger children and the lower risk kids, I really haven't thought about it at all. For me, it's awesome because, you know, you get to be this parent, and eventually, like, you know, they're gonna leave, and so you have, like, you get to fill this void, and then they'll leave, and then you can go back to doing whatever you want, you know, as opposed to having birth children where you're kind of on the hook for life with them, right? And it's not, you know, it's not like I'm going to sever the bonds with these children, you know, because they've become very tight, and I'm going to want them in my life if as long as they want me in their life.
Of course, yeah.
You don't have that responsibility. And so it's kind of nice, you know, you get to see how you could be as a father or a mother, whatever parent, and you get to almost like practice it, you know. And it's like and then once the kids, some kids are permanent ward, or they're in your care for you know, till they're 18 or whatever. Some kids, their parents start doing the right things and they move out, so they're only there for a year or so. Yeah, so for advice for it, you know, you gotta be willing to be generous with your parenting. You gotta be willing to just give it your all, and then be okay if they get if they're gone, you know. And so it's a certain constitution you have to have. But if you're an infertile person who wants to see what parenting would be like, it's kind of wonderful, you know. It's especially with the young ones. It's pretty magical because you really are their parent. Like, you know, you're doing everything. I'm brushing their teeth, you know, wiping their noses, cooking their food. Like it's all, you're checking off all the boxes of being a parent. And so if you're ever wondering, if you ever feel like there's a part of you missing, then it will be filled.
No kidding. I bet. No, it's just as much of a parent as anybody else. That's for sure. I'm sure you're in the trenches doing what every other parent would be doing with them, like you said, anyway. So that's good that it feels that way. I'm really glad. And I think a lot of people appreciate that advice too. Just the last question on that is like, do they know your foster kids a lot about your cancer journey? Do you go through that with them? And how do you navigate it if you do talk about that with them?
This is a good question.
Yeah.
Because the higher risk kids used it against me.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and that was pretty hurtful, to tell you the truth. Like, I'm a pretty tough when it comes to being put down by words. But because I was still a high risk specialized home when I had my second diagnosis, they saw me through the recovery and all that, and so they knew. And they would get pretty nasty, you know, making fun of me for having cancer and stuff like that. Like, they're children, right? So it's is what it is. But yeah, that wasn't the great. That made me feel pretty terrible.
Of course, yeah, I bet.
Yeah. Whereas opposed to my not, ever since I switched to general, you know, it's not something that I just like throw out there. But for example, my 11-year-old, you know, he made some harmless cancer joke. Like, it wasn't mean spirited at all, but he just made like a joke that was unnecessary to reference cancer. And so I just said to him, hey, that's not funny. And it's not funny because I've had cancer and I know exactly what it feels like. And it's not something that you can use as a reference to make a joke. You know, like, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. And we can, there are funny things to having cancer, you know. It's something we don't have to be depressed when we talk about it.
No.
You know, there has to be a certain air of respect when we're talking about, because there's a lot of suffering that goes along with that word. And so that's kind of just how I navigate. You know, I try to explain to them, you know, the gravity that the word holds, and to be careful when you're using it. And the 11-year-old sweet kid, you know, apologized, that kind of thing. So it's like, it's such a different dynamic, and they get it. And I think it's important, you know, to because I know their history, I know the traumas that they go through. I think it's important to share, just like the group meetings. Like, we're all sharing our traumas, we're all sharing our low points. And then once we all realize, like, you know, hey, we all are going through like some heavy stuff, that creates a really solid bond, and you get a lot of trust with each other from that. And so, yeah, I think it's important to talk about it. The 6-year-olds, you know, they don't even know how to spell their own names. So no point in going into depth with them, but you know, it's like, yeah, it's as they come of age, definitely, I think it's important to talk about it. And going to the group meetings has given me the confidence to share my story with anyone. You know, everyone and anyone, if they want to hear it, I'm prepared to tell it. So
that's awesome. No, it's a great point, actually, is that you know, I think depending on age, when they kind of understand the concept of cancer and can I don't know, like just kind of pick up on the nuances and things like that. I think it's important. Like you said, I know everyone has their opinion, but you know, that's the thing. It's like the history, you know, their background. It's only fair that they kind of know a little bit about you, because then that bond is stronger, like you were saying.
Well, and it's important to me that they understand, you know, like how that word can cut, because you never know a kid at school, you know, parent or brother or whatever, even them, young kid who's gone through cancer. You never know you never know who's gone through the experience of cancer. So to get them aware of that, you know, how much that can hurt someone, is important to maybe avoid that kind of situation where they're making jokes about it. Not just, you know, a very casual joke, but, you know, that could resonate very deeply with someone, right? So,
of course, yeah. No, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but yeah, to be able to kind of like open yourself up, I think it does. It's with everybody, but especially with kids, I think they know when you're being honest with them, and to be able to open up and share that part of your story, I think it does like create that awareness, and it probably enhances the bond and dynamic. So that's interesting to hear. I'm glad you touched on that. And you mentioned there as well, just in that conversation, Nick, about like bringing it up, and obviously you're comfortable sharing your story now because of these support groups. When you found YACC after so many years of isolation from young adults, I know you had your own peer support programs before Young Adult Cancer Canada, but how has that really benefited you over the last little while since meeting YACC and really the cancer groups that you've met? I know you touched on it, but how has it really benefited you to kind of reduce that isolation?
well, I mean, it's changed everything. I wasn't like, I think I said it before, but I really wasn't hopeful of my future. I was kind of going through the motions in life, and just being very weary, you know, and just thinking of the worst case scenarios. Like I'm a pretty positive person, but you know, you can only be positive to a certain extent. And once you hear these stories, and you like, I love the phrase that YACC uses. It's the greatest club you don't want to be a part of, you know. And you know, the first time I heard that, I was like, I don't know, but it's really settled into me, and like I love that saying, and I think that's really what it is. You know, that like YACC has created an environment that it makes you feel like having cancer is lucky because you get to be a part of YACC. And that is just like, it's just shifting perspective. And it's like, for me, it was so big, because I was constantly thinking, what am I going to do if it comes back? What am I going to do if it comes back? Having had it come back once already, right? I think, you know, it's bad enough to have cancer once, but when it comes back a second time, it really shakes things up quite a bit, because it's like, okay, well, third time is a pattern, right? And you just kind of, you're almost expecting it. And then getting in touch with YACC, like the first YACC program that I got involved with was the Survivor Conference, and that just blew my mind. You specifically had a great intro, and I just like, you set the tone for the whole. I was like, wait. So this is gonna be just a bunch of these guys, like a bunch of these folks talking in this way, with this great energy, with this great positivity, and like, I love how so many people know each other already. You know, everybody kind of bounces their stories off of each other, and I can see the relationships that have been created from YACC. And it's like, you know, I have good friends in my life, but there is a wall. There's like, they don't understand. And like, even my really compassionate, kind friends, like, I feel close to them, but there's just a part of me, a huge part of me, that I can't talk to them about. Like, you know, I can't talk to them about, but it's only a one-way conversation, and that's not good. Nobody wants to just preach to their friends and have them ingest, right? It's got to be back and forth. And so I could see right away with YACC that there's such a reciprocation of these shared stories, of these shared experiences, and that was something that I was totally oblivious to, you know, and I didn't even know it existed. So, you know, after that Survivor Conference, like, my spirits were lifted higher than I ever have been. After I quit drinking, I leaned onto smoking weed quite a bit. So a heavy weed smoker for a long time. And pretty much, by my first peer support and then getting introduced with YACC, I now can smoke weed recreationally, and I have an addictive personality that's unheard of. Like I'm so proud of myself, that I can, skip a few days, have it whenever I want, and it's now I'm using it like appropriately as opposed to abusing it. And only thing that changed in my life was YACC and shared stories and talking to people with similar experiences. I think living in isolation, I was self-medicating myself to just push that part of me down because I didn't have the people that I could share it with. I didn't have that freedom to express myself and feel like I was being heard. So yeah, it's been a big deal.
100%. No, thanks for sharing all that. I'm always happy to hear, especially when people come and they're new somewhat to this specific space, YACC, and just like how they got involved. It's awesome to hear. There's always like a positive, ray of sunshine around it. So that's incredible. And we're happy to have you. I'm happy to just talk with you right now. It's awesome to kind of break that barrier. And just more so outside of the cancer experience in total, Nick, just kind of reading up on you in preparation for this and things like that. You are a self-proclaimed lover of arts. Mm-hmm. So I found that interesting. Is there any particular like medium of art you find is like the closest or that you appreciate more? And any recommendations to anybody who's getting interested in arts in general? That's a big, vague question. I'm sure you could go off. But
I love that. My recommendation to people is just do anything. Like cooking is an art, whatever, like if you can find any form to express yourself, it is going to unlock, or I shouldn't say it is, but it to me, I feel like it unlocks just this part of you that releases so much pressure, internal pressure. My personal favorite medium has always been poetry and writing. I've been consistently, I think there was maybe 3 years of my entire life I went without consistently writing. And I always love the phrase like when people talk about, oh, I'm a writer or I'm a poet, it's like you're only a writer when you're in the act of writing, and so I really believe that truly, because it's not about it's really not about the final product. It's all about the process, and that goes for every art. But yeah, poetry has always been my number one. I used to share my poems with people and they weren't really that interested in them. And I mentioned that I played guitar when I was younger. I took about a 20-year break from that. And then when I quit drinking, I actually got into playing guitar again. And so I started putting my poems to music. And then I started showing my friends that, and then all of a sudden, oh, this is great writing. These are great. Really, you just need to write songs if you're a poet and you're not doing stuff. So that's been really fun. I go Winnipeg is just a monster for art, and we have like several open mics. You can pretty much go to an open mic every day of the week here in Winnipeg. It's awesome. There's a couple that I go to pretty regularly. And it's almost the same kind of atmosphere as peer support, where you're all getting up there, sharing things that you've made up on your own and you're alone in your room, being extremely vulnerable, and we're all in the same thing together, all just up there sharing. And there's such a high respect for anybody who just gets on the mic and does original songs. Like, it's great if you're an awesome guitar player, awesome singer, and you do a cover, that's great. Everybody's gonna clap for you still. But it's people who bring their original songs and music, that's what really gets the crowd going, right? And so that's been really fun. And the way that's been an outlet for me has been just great for the healing. I've written many songs about my experience with cancer, and I consider those ones my best songs. And it's just like one of those things where, it's a unique experience, and to be able to turn it into something that you're proud of, it's like you don't look at it as such a death sentence. You don't look at it as such a negative anymore. It's like, hey, like I've gone through this, and now look at this beautiful art that I've made because of this experience. I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't experienced it. So it sheds a different light on it. But yeah, I like I actually picked up beading not so long ago, and that's been really great too. Like just it's very meticulous. That goes back to my persistent quality there. Like you got to be pretty persistent to learn how to bead, because it is so tedious. Like there's no fast way to bead. Like even just picking up the individual beads with the needle, it's just like but it's for me it's calming. And if you stick with it and you don't get discouraged, you can create some beautiful stuff. So yeah, I like my grandpa he was actually a judge, but he loved theater and poetry. So he would always tell me stories and read me poems, and we would go to the like operas or plays, and it was nice to see this like very very masculine guy who had a very professional job, but had a deep love for the arts. And I think that was kind of what was the role model for me, to be like, this is important, because he just like he really loved the arts. He would write his own plays, and then we'd have a family gathering, and as we walked in the door, he would assign everybody a character and be like, what's going on here? He'd have like a copy of the script for everybody. He'd make everybody play, and it's just little things like that where it made everything so fun. And I love sports. And I think being active is very important. But there's something about art, that's just, I find it's a little more special. It really helps the healing. It helps understand yourself. And I like, whatever it is, like dancing, whatever medium, just go for it. And yeah, it's important.
Or no, I mean, I 100% agree. I think any hobby in general, if you're going through like an illness or something, I think takes your mind off of it. Even like reading, or whatever it really is. I went to an arts high school, so you had to audition to get into it, and so I took theater and acting for 4 years. So I'm on your side, and I'm a big sports guy. I think there's a good balance though, both ways. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I know. We could probably do a whole nother episode on that, to be honest with you.
I'll have to write a script for you next time we can go through a play.
Let's do it. I would love that. That'd be a blast. I only have one other question for you, totally off the board, but I ask everybody this question. What are your top 3 favorite fruits?
Well, I'll take you to the back to the Mantario, because blueberries are prevalent on the Mantario Trail. Raspberries are also there, and you can find wild strawberries there too. So those are my favorite. Blueberries #1, raspberries, and then strawberries. They can all find on the Mantario Trail.
That's easy. If you can find them on one go, why not? Why wouldn't those be your favorites? And berries, I'll find packs. If you're a berry fan, you like all of them. That's amazing.
Well, every now and then I won't pack quite enough food, so then I'll end up having to eat a few handfuls of blueberries and raspberries on the way.
That's true journeyman right there. Just walking across the fields. I love it. Nick, this was awesome. I appreciate you jumping on with us. A lot of really awesome stuff with fostering and dealing with infertility, the concept of being like a man in the cancer community, and really just what the support meant to you. So I think a lot of people are going to love it. Like I said, I appreciate you joining us. I appreciate everybody here who's watched and kind of gone through this conversation with Nick. I'm sure you'll see a lot more of him. He is an Insight team member, so he'll be around. You'll probably get a lot of chance to write too. I know you're a big writing fan, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of opportunity for blogs. And I think people are really going to like them when you do throw them in the mix. Just, putting you on the hot seat now, Nick. But
yeah. Put the spotlight on me. I'm ready.
I love it. I love it. Again, appreciate you joining, and for everyone watching, and we'll catch up with everybody shortly. Take care, guys.
Pleasure is all mine.